Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Sanders, and this is Watch Art Sci, the art and science of watch collection. Today, what I want to talk about, I suppose we could talk about them as alternatives to getting your mitts on a watch. But what I wanted to start off with was Abraham Louis Breguet's subscription or subscription plan. Recently, in fact, I think it won a grand prize at the GPHG this year, is a new watch by Breguet called the subscription watch. And I think a lot of people think, well, that's a special watch, and it is, but there's two things. There's a watch or a subscription watch and the process of how watch subscriptions work. Basically, this is what happened. Before the French Revolution, Abraham Louis Breguet was making watches for the king and the queen and the royals and so forth. Essentially, you have a few people with lots of money, and they would who wanted his watches, and so he was in great shape. And especially if the king wanted his watches, everybody else wanted them too. Okay, all right, everybody who could afford them, I should say. Anyhow, during the French Revolution, the people were during the period called the Terrors when they were cutting everybody's head off. They wanted to get the royals and anybody associated with them, and Louis had to sneak out of Paris, and he went to Switzerland and lived with his grandparents for a period of time. And after he was able to go back to Paris, uh, the royals were gone, and so who's he going to sell his watch to? And so he came up with this subscription plan. And the way it worked, a quarter of the watch, or the value of the watch, let's say he wanted to sell a watch for $1,000, and so the person would put down $250 and or 250 francs or something like that. And then when the watch became available, or before the watch became available, the subscription plan, but you'd put in so much for whatever periods they used. It could be monthly, or it could have simply been the other 3 quarters. But the point is that he used the money for two reasons. One, for the production of the watches, but equally important, it would tell him how many watches he needed. He said, "Wait, put a notice out about a subscription watch available," and nobody came for it, or very few, then he wouldn't have to make a lot of them. On the other hand, if he had a lot or a few or whatever it was, he could nail it and wouldn't have any too many or too few. Um, and so that was another advantage. And of course, for the buyer, this was great because he didn't have to come up with the whole amount. He could put 25% down and then pay a little on an affordable basis until he got his watch. Um, so, the usual, the kind of marketing and advertising and so forth, at least after the watch was all the subscribers had it, they didn't have to pay that. So it was very economical in a lot of ways. Also, too, Breguet, I don't know, I don't want to, he didn't cut corners. It wasn't that, but he sort of rounded them off in his watches. One of the most popular ones, in fact, the one that won the Grand Prix this year, that was called the Breguet subscription watch, had one hand. So I think it's less things to worry about. It had a hand, and then it had little markers every so many minutes, like a lot of one-hand watches have. So now what I want to do is take a look at some modern version of a subscription watch, and one I happen to be involved with. In a way, it was sort of one of these before and afters. Instead of before and after the French Revolution, it was before and after the pandemic. I don't know how many of you recall, I'm sure everybody remembers the pandemic, but what happened afterwards, The price of watches shot up simply because the process of making them had shut down for about a year. And then getting people back was a problem. All kinds of issues that were going on, and so the prices went up. Well, a group of us in 2019, which was actually before the pandemic, I had met with Rolf Lang in Dresden, and suggested that he wanted any advice on selling his watches, and I said, well, I don't know how to do that, but this might work. I had a bunch of guys I know, and we could pass it around and have it on social media. Well, we did that with a watch, and somebody bought it. And so after doing that, we said, well, maybe what we could try is contract with one of the watchmakers and have our own watch, and then we don't have to pay for the markups or anything else, and then we can have our watch. So we didn't subscribe to a business so much. We were the business. We were subscribed to ourselves, so to speak. So we all chipped in same amount and contacted well, that was another thing. We had very high goals. And so one of the best known Swiss watchmakers, in fact, as a company that would make watch movements for it was Adenauer. So we contacted them and worked it up. And so after the first one, we did another one, and then we're doing another one, and then another one. And it all works out. We all pool our funds. And we lay it out so it's more affordable for all. Very much what we did, basically, we took, I don't know how much we realized, but we did what Breguet had done. So anyway, so this is one thing, and we're able to make watches that we otherwise couldn't afford. And so that was one thing. Now, another kind of thing, and somebody mentioned this, they said that Breguet was really the original crowdfunder, that his watches were. So crowdfunding is when, for an individual watch or a watch company that exists that wants to have, try out a new watch, and so they go to a fundraising place, like there's a place called Kickstarter. And not only watches, any kind of business that you have and you want to get some seed money for it, you go to Kickstarter and you tell them what you want to do and how much you want to raise and, what you'll do with the money once you raise it. Well, a number of watch companies, a lot of the microbrands got their start. In fact, they might even just keep on funding the next watch with it. Three of them that were mentioned. One was called Filippo Loretti. It was a brand I hadn't heard of, and it was sort of interesting. They have both quartz and mechanical movements. Some of their watches are very, very attractive. Another one that I've known about is called Zurich. They have a lot of innovation. They do these things with multiple columns for their for the minutes minutes and hours and so forth. And instead of going around and around, they have poems on either end of a hand. They look like barbells. And as they go around, one arm is a little shorter than the other, and so they go through different of the columns. I mean, the rows that they have with all the numbers on it. There's one pictured below there. You probably have seen it before. Now, another one, I've heard a lot of people talk about it. Is company, by the way, too, Zurich, they use the Miyota 82 S7 on their for their automatics. That's important. Now, the final one is Baltic watches. And one thing I'll say for Baltic, they have very nice designs. They're very attractive watches. They're a little more expensive. And compared to Filippo, Zurich's a little more expensive. But when I say more expensive, we're talking about dealing with hundreds and not thousands or tens of thousands. Baltic watches are sort of the top of the bottom line, I guess you might say, that with good designs. Xerox has very good designs too, I might add. Now they have a picture on the bottom right there is a very colorful chronograph of theirs. They have a Solita SW 511 in it, and the both of them are. I mean, all of these watches started off as crowdfunding. They'd put out a little thing, and people interested in watches would say, "Hey, would you like to subscribe to this in some way, or like to invest in it?" And that's how they got going. So Breguet's idea has taken on many different forms today, and so if you look at a lot of the microbrands, a good number of them are crowdfunded. Now, the final thing that was sort of interesting is one, to tell you the truth, I'd never heard of it before. And apparently they can be very popular. And these are what I call watch lending subscriptions. They were sort of like a lending library of watches. And what you do, you subscribe to some service, and every month they'll send you a different watch. And now there's more details to it than that, and there are different levels. You can have sort of bottom level watches, mid or high level, and all of them seem to have followed that model. And so that if you want a more expensive watch, your monthly bills or your monthly subscription would be greater. If you want sort of just a watch, and so a lot of different watches going through your collection, you could have the lower ones. Three that have been mentioned. First was this one. Apparently is the best known and very popular, called the Watch Gang, and they have different subscription plans. The watches, their main watches, though, they're using Seiko and Citizen, two Japanese watchmakers, both of whom make some very, very good watches, but they're very much price-wise, they're more economical. Now, another one, this is a newer one called Wrist Mafia. It's something like the Watch Gang, except the watches are a little higher level, Rolex, Omega, Tag Heuer. And all of these have some of the minute elements of what you can and can't do or how you can do it. The third one that I'm going to mention, there are a lot more than this, is called 11 James, and it's sort of for the higher end. And so when you subscribe to that, and again, they have different levels of subscriptions, and you get sent a Rolex, a Patek Philippe, or Audemars Piguet. I don't know if they have any more of that, but all three of those are fairly pricey watches. And sometimes some guys say, well, I need an Audemars Piguet because I'm going to go to a fancy job interview, and so it'd be a heck of a lot better way than coming up with 20, 30, 40,000 bucks to get one. Anyhow, there was one other company too. Is they have sort of a surprise box every month. You subscribe to it, and they send you a surprise. That's oh boy, I don't know what I'm getting. That could be a lot of fun too. All right, so that's sort of my take on the subscription process for getting a watch. I'd very much like to know what you think. I'd really like to know if you belong to either any of these or some other ones like that. Opportunity to subscribe if you like. Until next time, this is Bill Sanders for Watch Art Sci, the art and science of watch collection.